All good to go. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining in today. Today I have Jessica Dettmann joining us. Jessica's a Sydney-based writer and performer. After working as an editor for Random House and HarperCollins, she went freelance when she had her first child 11 years ago. She began a blog, Life with Gusto, which turns a sharp but affectionate eye on modern parenthood, before starting to write fiction in 2017. She has performed her work several times at comedy venues around Sydney and has appeared on several podcasts. Her debut novel, How to Be Second Best, was published in January 2019. The Herald Sun called it hilarious and heartwarming. And her second novel, This Has Been Absolutely Lovely, was released in January 2021. It was described by Tim Minchin as hilarious, I can't even say that word, but poignant and genuine page turner. And the Sydney Morning Herald called it sharply witty, yet generous-hearted. Jess is currently in lockdown with her husband, 2 kids and 2 cats. She's writing her third novel, a romantic comedy, while homeschooling her children against everyone's will. And when she's not writing, Jess enjoys walking no further than 5 kilometres from her house, ordering groceries online, and not seeing her friends and family. So, yeah, that sounds like a lot of our lives at the moment. So thanks so much for joining us. Just want to let people know watching that HarperCollins has generously said that they'll give some giveaways for us today. So if you want to ask a question of Jessica, please post a comment in the comments box and I will read out the question. And I also wanted to mention that I have recently listened to the audio of How to Be Second Best, which I really, really loved. And I want to know a bit more about where you came up with the ideas of your books, but just wondering if you want to start off by telling us a little bit more about your books.
I'll be very happy to. So the first book I wrote was this one, How to Be Second Best.
And I've noticed the 2 covers. You've got the other one on the other side.
That was that original trade format, and that was the B format. So this is the story of a woman called Emma, who is in her mid-30s and has a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and lives 3 doors away from her ex-husband, who has a new wife and another 3-year-old who's only a few days apart from her and his 3-year-old, which all had come out very unceremoniously just after the birth of both those babies. Now, Emma is a freelance editor, and she has somehow ended up, in addition to doing freelance editing work, doing all the childcare for all of those 3 children, despite the fact that one of them's not hers. She's trying to be the very best ex-wife she can possibly be, and the book follows her as she starts to try and extricate herself from that situation. Shenanigans ensue.
I found it quite an amazing, to believe that someone would actually do that. And
but you know what? So many people have told me since this came out that they know people.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Yeah. But yeah.
I don't know how people run one family, let alone 2.
Exactly, yeah. And be as forgiving as she was.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. She's kind of so annoyingly forgiving about this that you just want to slap her at the beginning of this book. And that's a very common reaction from readers, in fact. But I just kind of wanted to look at it from the perspective of how far people might go in order to make things nice for their children, and just kind of try and remove all the antagonism from a situation to their own detriment, really.
So how did you get the idea for that book?
Well, the idea from that book came from my childhood, when I knew 2 little girls who were sisters and really close in age. And I never really understood how that worked with their family until I was a fair bit older, and it was explained and came a bit clearer to me. And again, I had always sort of sat there in the back of my head. And then when I was starting to write fiction and kind of searching around for a premise and a setup that would throw a lot of challenges in a person's way, that really leapt out at me as the way to go.
Mm-hmm. And your second novel, This Has Been Absolutely Lovely.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had a chance to read that one yet, but looking forward to reading it when I've got some time. Would love to know some more about that. I've heard some great things about it.
So that's the story of two women. Mostly it's a whole family saga, but it's centered around two women called Annie and Molly. Annie's 58 and she was a young pop star in a band called Love Triangle with her two best friends, two boys. Went to England, almost got into Eurovision, did get into Eurovision, but couldn't perform because she was pregnant.
Oh, okay.
and they got sent home.
Well,
she gave up at that point, went home, had babies, had 3 kids, raised them, and the book opens at her father's funeral, where she has just spent the last 10 years of her life looking after her aged parents as they slowly declined and died, and as her children had grown up and left home. And she suddenly gets this sense that she might actually be free again and might be able to just start considering restarting her music career in some capacity. And of course, at that point, all of her children reverse empty nest on her, and they just all come back to the house for Christmas and in various states of crisis in their lives. And it's about, the question of whether there's any statute of limitations on parenthood and when can people stop expecting all that they do from mothers and wives and women in general.
And I have to say that sounds like something I've heard from a lot of friends and people that happening certainly.
Yeah, well, and one of the children is pregnant, and her plan for when her baby's born is that her mother will look after it a couple of days a week, and Annie is really not up for that. And so the book kind of looks at those expectations that my generation have on the generation above us, and how feasible that really is.
And what was your first idea for that book?
The very first idea for that book came from a postcard. This postcard, which is ABBA.
Oh yes, yeah.
And Agneta looks really, really lonely and really left out. And I started to think about what that would be like if you were in a band and you were the odd one out. Now, Annie is in a relationship with one of the people in the band, but that shifts over time, and she ends up no longer attached to anyone in the love triangle. So that was one jumping off point. There were kind of 2 others. The other one was a friend of my mum's who was doing 4 days a week of childcare for her daughter and was exhausted. And Mum kept telling me that story, and I kept thinking, oh, okay, there's really something to explore there. And then weirdly, the other thing is this concept that comes up in the book. The house that they all live in, which is the house Annie grew up in, is set on a block that has a right-of-way along the side, which technically belongs to their neighbour, but they're allowed to drive across it in order to get to their own garage behind the house. And I grew up, my parents have a property that has a right-of-way across it, as I think many rural properties do. And I always just found that series of words really intriguing, a right-of-way. And it always was pronounced right-of-way as well, like that was actually like a driveway, right-of-way. And then the house I have now also has that situation. So someone's always allowed to cross someone else's land to get to their own home. And I just started to explore that as a metaphor for people being able to trample across each other's lives endlessly. Because you signed up for it.
Yeah, that's quite a good relation. And both your books sound like they really explore relationships.
They do.
The next book, is that going to be similar?
It kind of is. It's going a little bit of a different direction. It's more of a romantic comedy. I mean, there is romance in How to Be Second Best. It follows a bit more of a traditional romantic comedy shape. Less so in This Has Been Absolutely Lovely, although it's kind of a woman having a a romance with her own future,
Mm.
potentially. But this one is really more of a straight rom-com. And in fact, it's about a romance publisher.
Okay.
And it's sort of based loosely around the Shakespeare play Much Ado About Nothing.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Sounds
I'm
good.
I'm not ready to say too much more about it, but it's really fun to write.
And how far along are you with that?
I'm some way along.
Yeah.
It's going to be out Mother's Day, I think, the year after next. So I've got till the beginning of next year to finish it off.
Yeah.
So it's getting there. It's not easy in this lockdown, but
no. Yeah. And how are you going with like, have you got young children yourself that you?
Yeah, I've got an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. So there's some pretty intensive involvement in their home learning and just generally looking after them. Like, they're just finding this really a very hard time, as everybody is. So,
is it giving you any inspiration for any new future books?
No, I have to say, really not. No. I try not to think about them at all when I get my writing time.
Yeah.
But they, there's always funny things they do and say. Although they're kind of reaching the point where I can't ruthlessly exploit them as much as I did when they were small children, because they can read now.
Yeah. And we've got quite a few people watching now, which is great, and I've got some questions coming through. Before you mentioned with the different covers of How to Be Second Best, about trade and B, I think, was it?
Yeah.
Someone's wondering what that means.
So
Sarah's wondering.
The first size that a paperback generally comes out in is this one, which is about 28 centimeters high.
So it's the bigger,
that's
the bigger
size. Format.
Yeah.
And they come out like that first, and sometimes, not always, they will reissue it a year later in a slightly smaller, more handbag sized edition. And sometimes they keep the original cover, and sometimes they have another go with a different style, just to tweak it a bit, maybe grab a slightly different audience, which I think is what they went for with these.
Yeah. No, that's interesting to know. Jill wonders what your favourite genre is to read, and I'm wondering if maybe you might have been reading something lately you want to recommend to us.
I like a lot of genres. I have actually, I will confess, found it really, really hard to read anything in the last few months since the lockdown started. I found it's not conducive to reading. I know some people just can't do anything but read. I find it really hard at the moment. However, I'm reading a couple of things at the moment that I haven't finished. I mean, obviously, I haven't finished this because it's gigantic, but and this is not a genre I normally read. This is a kind of historical memoir of Laura Ingalls Wilder, who wrote The Little House on the Prairie.
Yes, yeah.
So I'm reading those with my son at the moment, and I think we're on to our 5th, and we only started them at the beginning of lockdown, so we're kind of ripping through them. If anyone hasn't read them, they're amazing to read, even as an adult. They're, the story of a pioneer family in the 1860s, all through the Midwest and west of the United States. And this is this kind of goes into more of the political
and of the writer,
social history, of the author, because they're all completely autobiographical, and that I find mind-blowing.
Interesting. I haven't read the books, but I watched the TV series.
Oh yeah, the TV series. So it's extraordinary, her life and how she ended up. She sold 68 million books now, and
I think she was in the TV series as well, wasn't she?
Oh, probably. I think they probably would have had her in it, because she lived till she was in her 90s. I'm also reading this book, which is called In My Defense, I Have No Defense by Sinead Stubbins. That's just a really, really funny, clever, witty series of personal essays. And I'm finding that very helpful at the moment, because the character I'm writing is, 6 or 8 years younger than I am, and not a person with children. She's living a very different life to mine. And the author of this is much younger and cooler and funnier. And so I'm finding that handy to read to kind of get a sense of what life might be like if you weren't doing what I'm doing all the time. Also, I have recently read Last Night by Valerie McFarlane. This is I don't think that's the real cover, that's the proof copy from the publisher. If anyone doesn't know her, she writes the best rom-coms around at the moment. They're just brilliant. And this is her latest one. And it's more than just a generic romantic comedy. It's very clever. She's very funny. Any of her books, once you start, you'll just rip through them, I think.
Thanks for those recommendations.
All right.
Wendy wonders if you find the characters seem to take over the dialogue when you're writing.
Once I figure out who they are, they do, yes. But until I get a really good handle on them, I find it very difficult. I think Molly in my second book is the person I found it hardest to nail down. She's a really tricky character because she's all sorts of things. She's manipulative, but she's actually a kind, good person. She's quite self-centered, but I didn't want to make her thoroughly unlikable. And she's all over the place. She doesn't make a lot of sense in the world, and so it's quite tricky to write a character like that without looking like you actually just you haven't written them well. Whereas in fact she's just a bit of a shambles. So she was a bit harder, but I think I got there with her in the end.
And Jill's wondering if you'd always wanted to be an author.
That's a really good question, because I kind of maybe did on some level, but not really consciously. I worked in publishing for a very long time, and before that I did an English degree, and doing an English degree just makes you think that all books are written by dead white men, basically, and the books you study are not books that are written by people like me. And so I just sort of didn't see myself in anything I really read back then. But then, starting to work in publishing and meeting more authors, you realise that they're just people. And eventually it becomes a little bit more normalised and felt like something I felt brave enough to do. I've always written a little bit, but not much. I really didn't write any fiction at all till the first page of How to Be Second Best.
And could you tell us a little bit about how you got that first book published?
Yeah, so I really played the long game. I started working at the bottom of the publishing heap as an editorial assistant, and by the time I left HarperCollins, I worked at Random House for a long time, and then HarperCollins just for a little while when I was pregnant with my first child. And I met all these great people, and by the time I 6 or 7 years later was feeling like I might want to write, they were all in great positions of power. And some were agents and some were publishers. So I kind of had a little foot in the door as far as getting my work into someone's hands.
A good network.
So I had I started writing a blog when my first baby was really little, and I wrote that intermittently until it's in fact continues. I just restarted it a few weeks ago, and by about 2016, I was starting to think I might try and put together a collection of the blogs as a sort of book of essays, a bit like that Sinead Stubbins one, but with more babies in it. And so I started talking to an agent, and she went to a couple of publishers and talked to them about the idea, and HarperCollins, Catherine Milne and Anna Valding at HarperCollins came back and said that why would anyone want to publish that? They were there for free on the internet. So perhaps I might like to consider writing commercial fiction, and they thought my voice lent itself to that. I found that a little bit of a daunting prospect because I had not actually, ever thought I could write a novel. I thought I didn't have an imagination for it. But then I tried, and I had a go, and I wrote 3 chapters and a synopsis for the first book, which they looked at and they said, yes, we like those 3 chapters and those characters, and that's great. And that synopsis, you are just trying to be one of the Moriartys.
Oh, okay.
And that and I was, absolutely, like it was fully domestic noir, crimey, bodies in the backyard business, and it really did not fit with my voice and my style and the characters I had created, which they very helpfully pointed out, and then said, no, why don't you actually just take those characters and follow what might really happen to them? So it's, it turned into much more of a naturalistic family comedy.
Yeah.
After that. And then they published it.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to write that first copy?
About a year, the first draft. Yeah. Once I got going and I had a deadline, that really put a rocket under me. I need a deadline.
Yeah. And Belinda's wondering if you have a structured writing day. I don't know if that's hard with having your kids at home and trying to homeschool. And
well, in ideal times, my kids go to school 5 days a week, and I sit down at my desk at 10 o'clock after I've done some great exercise and figured out everything else in my life, and then I write for hours. But that's not ever how it works. And certainly at the moment, I hadn't written anything for the first 6 or 8 weeks of lockdown, and now my husband has taken over 3 days a week of the homeschooling, and I'm for the moment getting 3 days a week to do the writing, because it just takes me some time every day to get my head into that space. I find it I know some authors are really good at jumping in and out of their work. I'm really, really not. It sounds like diva-ish, but I require time and peace to get my head into my story and my characters, particularly at the beginning, when I don't know who they are yet, really, and what they're doing. So that's what I'm doing, and we'll see how that progresses.
And do you like to set goals for yourself each day?
I do. I like a number, and I like to hit it. When I was just restarting the writing a few weeks ago, my new goal was to write more words than Sydney was having COVID cases every day.
Okay.
And that was fine for a while. It's getting
Until
a little bit more
got
difficult.
up a little bit higher.
Yeah. But I'm trying to write 5,000 words a week at the moment, which is a modest goal. But I'm adjusting it as I go. But yes, word goals really help me.
Yeah. And Sharon's said that she really enjoyed this. Has been absolutely lovely. It's an eye-catching cover, and she wonders if you have any input in your covers.
I get a bit of input with the covers. The original cake one for that book was my idea, and they just took it and ran with it. I just said, what about like a really poorly iced birthday cake like you would make for your child very late the night before a party? And I thought they did a beautiful job of that. This one came almost fully done to me, and I was really happy with it. I had couple of comments. We changed the outfit a little bit. The outfit needs to look like it could be either a 58-year-old or a 28-year-old. Yeah. Because that's sort of the every woman on the cover. And I think they did a good job with that. But I'm really happy. My designer, Hazel Lamb at HarperCollins, does beautiful work.
Yeah, they certainly stand out, the covers. Belinda wonders about the titles. So the titles are probably maybe a little bit different than some titles you might see.
Yeah, they're long. I think the publishers, every time I give them another one, I'm like, oh, you already have a long name. You can't have long titles too. How to Be Second Best didn't have a title the whole time until it was done and handed in. And then I, wrote a really long list of ideas, and that's where I landed, and they were happy with that. This has been absolutely lovely. Changed its title about 4 times while I was writing it. I kept coming up with the title and then writing to the title. So initially I wanted to call it Housebound, because it's there's also a storyline of the inheritance of the house that Annie grew up in, and the fact that the whole family is bound to the house. And also the idea of being stuck in the house. So it was going to be Housebound, and then it was going to be Leave Everything to Annie. which suggests both a will and an inheritance, and having everything left for you to do as well, in terms of all of the jobs in life. And then eventually I remembered something that my grandmother used to say when people had outstayed their welcome in her house. And she would very politely stand up and just say, "This has been absolutely lovely." And then people know.
They know it's time to
it's
go.
It's time to go, yeah. And so that just hit me as being perfect for this story.
Yeah. Geraldine said she really enjoyed Second Best, and this has been absolutely lovely. And she wonders if there are other authors that inspire your writing.
Yes, there are. I really like Valerie McFarlane, as I mentioned. And then the other two probably that inspire me the most, sorry, I'm just turning around and not even talking to the camera, are Barbara Trapido, who wrote this book, Brother of the More Famous Jack. It's having a little resurgence at the moment. I think a lot of authors of my age are suddenly talking about this book and how amazing it is.
Okay.
I love her writing, and everything she's written I just think is extraordinary. Also, Mary Wesley, who started writing in her 70s. Had a first book published in her 70s. I think she wrote a little bit before that. Her books are very clever and intricately plotted and so readable and easy. I like books that feel quite easy to me. I don't really like to work very hard when I read.
Yeah.
and those two authors accomplished that without losing any cleverness or wit, and that's something that I really aspire to.
Holly said comedy is specific and her favourite. Do you have an agent, and what agents are looking for comedy?
I do have an agent at Curtis Brown, Pippa Masson. She's fantastic. And I don't know who's looking for comedy. Probably everyone, I would think, at the moment. I'm feeling like there's a lot of room for humour.
Yeah, and a lot of people are wanting.
Read Jenny up.
A lot of people are probably wanting some humour as well to
something
read.
Escapist. I know that there's a lot of fantastic television programs that are 6-part half-hour comedies, mostly written by women and centering women at the moment, and I think they kind of mesh with the type of books I write. So I think, and a lot of those are written actually by stand-up comedians who are also writers. So I think there's a big market for it. Everyone needs to write more, but like worse than me, please. So more.
And what do you hope readers will love about your books?
I hope that they find them engaging, and that the characters feel real and annoying and fun and lovable and hateable all at once. I hope they just have a really good time reading my books.
Yeah. And Rowena's saying, are you including the current COVID situation into your new book, or are you just ignoring it?
That's such a good question, because I am a little bit on the fence with it still. I'm dancing around it a bit. When I first had the idea for this book, it was at the beginning of last year, right at the start of COVID. And I decided to address COVID somewhat in it, but writing about post-COVID. So, there are characters in this book who got married because they fell in love in hotel quarantine, for example.
Okay.
That they were in a short relationship together, came back to Australia, and all the heightened drama caused them to get married. But it's just going on, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this book is set in an office.
Not many people are going to offices.
That's an issue.
Yeah.
Great time to come up with an office comedy. So I don't know. At this point, I'm writing about it. I'm writing about a time after COVID, which I hope will come.
Yeah. Belinda wonders who has been your favourite character to write.
Really oddly, it's a small character who I've He's the only character I've carried through both books, and I've now put him in the third book as well. He's the neighbour. He's Emma's neighbour across the road called Ian.
Oh yeah, I liked him.
Yeah, Ian. He's just a bit. He's very shouty with his family. They all yell at each other all the time and wake people up. He's very open. He has some good words of advice as well. He does, yeah. And I liked him so much. I wanted to include somebody from the first book in the second book. I like those kind of Easter eggs that authors leave. So I added him into the second book. Although a lot of people haven't spotted him. A lot of people say, who is, I don't notice anyone from the first book, which means they need to reread it. He's fun to write because he's really honest, and I really like writing arguments, and he has a lot of arguments with his family.
And Wendy said, hopefully by the time your new book comes out, we will be pleased that COVID is gone.
Fingers crossed. Yes.
I'm wondering if you have someone who's really encouraged your writing.
I have everybody who's really encouraged my writing. I could not be luckier in that sense.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Yeah, I've got family and friends and colleagues. And then when I started writing my blog started because I was writing longer and longer captions on Facebook and status updates when I had a little baby, and was suddenly desperately finding the humour in that situation. And one day I said, if 10 of you, or I think maybe I said 10, if 10 of you like this, I'll start a blog. And lots more than 10 liked it. And I started a blog, and I just had, I never had a really massive readership for the blog, but that was quite devoted and really supportive and really kind. My family, my friends, my readers, I've had most beautiful responses to my books from my readers, and I'm so grateful for that.
No, that's great to hear. We've got a few people as well who are asking how they can find your blog.
It's called Life with Gusto. I have two cats. One of them's called Gusto.
Okay.
So we named it after her. So it's called Life with Gusto. It's at WordPress. So you can just Google that. You should be able to find it. You can also find me on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and there are links from there.
Okay. And Rowena wonders if you research dialogue, and if so, how?
No, and I don't know how you would. Yeah. No, dialogue I find quite easy to write. I find it easier than other parts of the book.
When we were allowed to go out, did you used to find yourself eavesdropping?
A little bit, yeah, but I don't know, people are a bit boring, aren't they, some of them? You've got to make up more interesting ones. And I think as an author, if you put too many things in that people then recognise themselves as having said, they stop talking in front of you. I don't want that to happen.
And are you someone, when you're writing, that you like to share your work with someone as you write, or do you rather wait till the end and give it to your editor?
I share a bit of it. Once I've got enough, I share it with my agent and my publisher. I talk to my husband a tiny bit about it, but for the first two books, I almost didn't mention any of it to him the whole time, and it drove him nuts because he was just so excited and happy for me. He just wanted to know what was going on. But no, I waited until I had a full draft before he read it. And the same with friends.
Yeah.
I just kind of keep it under my hat as much as I can.
And what do your children think about having a mother as a writer?
I think they're quite pleased. Yeah, I think they're proud. My son thinks he's famous because his name is on the internet now, because there's an ebook and he's thanked in it. No, they're very proud. They have enraged moments where they say they wish I was not writing or doing any sort of job, so that I could spend more time listening to them yell at me, I guess. But no, mostly they're very supportive, and they're both really into books. So that's good.
Yeah. And have you ever found yourself making up stories or writing stories for your children?
I have once, and it's coming out next year as a kids' book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, that sounds great. What sort of age?
So picture book. So I guess what, 3 to 6?
Yeah.
Sort of illustrated
Mm.
picture book. Yeah.
So is that something you tested out on your children first?
Yes, I did. I read it to them. I read it to them first, and they liked it. But I wanted to make it a book that adults found as funny as kids.
Oh, that sounds very exciting as well.
Hopefully, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for talking to us. It's been great chatting to you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
And hope we might have a chance to talk again when you've got a new book out. And I'm certainly looking forward to reading more of your books.
Thank you very much, Jackie.
And thanks to everyone who joined in. We had some great questions. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.